Hello, my name is Anthony Collins.
My name is Anthony Collins. I am 75 years old, and today I sat at the long oak dining table in my own house while my children discussed my life as if I were already dead. The room smelled like polished wood and old money, the kind of money I spent decades chasing. I cleared my throat, ready to speak, but my daughter raised her hand without even looking at me. Mom already explained everything, she said. We're going with her decision. In that moment, something inside me cracked. I realized I had become a stranger in the home I built, a guest in the family I sacrificed everything for. The shock didn't come from their words alone. It came from the silence that followed. No one defended me. Not my sons, not my youngest daughter, not even the grandchildren who used to run into my arms when they were small. All eyes turned toward their mother, Eleanor, as if she were the only voice that mattered. I sat there, surrounded by wealth, comfort, and luxury, and felt poorer than I had ever felt in my life. I had always believed success demanded distance. Growing up in a small apartment with a father who worked himself into an early grave, I promised myself I would never struggle. I chased promotions, investments, properties, and status. I missed birthdays, school plays, and quiet dinners. I told myself it was temporary, that one day my children would thank me for the life I gave them. I thought respect came from providing, from winning, from never showing weakness. Alina understood that hunger in me early on. We met young, married fast, and built a life that looked perfect from the outside. She managed the home while I managed the world. Somewhere along the way, she became the bridge between me and the children. When they needed permission, they went to her. When they had problems, they told her. I told myself that was normal. I told myself I was too busy to notice the distance growing like a wall. The first real warning came years ago, though I ignored it. I came home early one evening, a rare thing, and heard laughter from the living room. I stepped in, smiling, ready to join. The laughter stopped. Alina glanced at the kids, then at me, and said, "We were just finishing." They filed out, polite but stiff. I stood there alone, holding a gift I had bought to surprise them. That night I slept beside my wife and felt farther from my family than any business trip had ever taken me. Now at 75, the consequences sit heavy on my chest. My doctor says my heart is weak. My hands shake when I'm tired. I wanted my children close, wanted conversations, forgiveness, warmth. Instead, I watched them slide papers across the table, discussing my future care, my finances, my house. Alina spoke calmly, confidently, like a CEO presenting a plan. "It's for his own good," she said. They nodded. I tried to speak again. I said their names one by one, reminding them I was still here. My son finally looked at me, his eyes cold and unfamiliar. "Dad, you were never around," he said. "You don't get to control things now." The words hit harder than any betrayal I'd faced in business. I had lost deals, fortunes, even friends, but this was different. This was blood turning away. As they talked, memories flooded me. Little hands reaching for mine, unanswered calls, promises postponed. I had traded presence for power, love for leverage. I thought luxury would buy loyalty. I thought being the provider was enough. Sitting there, I understood the cruel irony. I had won everything except the one thing that mattered. Alina stood and announced a break. Chairs scraped, people left the room. She leaned down close to me, her voice soft but sharp. "This is how it has to be," she whispered. "They trust me, they always have." She smiled, not kindly but victoriously. That was when I realized this wasn't just neglect. This was something shaped, guided, controlled. I was alone again, staring at the table, listening to the echo of my own breathing. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows through the windows. For the first time, I felt afraid of the life I had built, afraid that my wealth had bought my isolation, afraid that I had handed my voice away without noticing. As I sat there, I heard Alina speaking to the children in the next room, her tone warm, reassuring, decisive. They listened. They always listened. And in that moment, a terrifying thought settled in my mind. What if the distance between me and my children wasn't an accident at all, but a design I was only just beginning to see? That night sleep refused to come. I lay in the master bedroom, staring at the ceiling I had paid to have imported from Italy decades ago. Gold trimmed, elegant, expensive, and completely empty of comfort. Alina slept beside me, her breathing calm and steady, as if nothing unusual had happened that day. I wondered how someone could sleep so peacefully after erasing another person's voice. In the quiet darkness, memories crept in like old ghosts. I saw myself at 35, standing in a glass office tower, signing my first major acquisition deal. I remembered the rush, the applause, the feeling that I was becoming someone important. That same night, Alina had called me repeatedly. Our son had won an award at school. I told her I'd make it up to him. I never did. I told myself those sacrifices were necessary. Every promotion came with a promise. I whispered to myself. Just one more year, then I'll slow down. One more project, then I'll be present. But life doesn't wait for intentions. While I was busy building an empire, my children were building bonds with their mother. Alina was always there. She attended every school event, every doctor's appointment, every tearful night. She became their interpreter of the world, their emotional anchor. When they asked about me, she'd say, "Your father loves you. He's just busy." I believed those words protected me. I didn't realize they were also replacing me. By the time I noticed the distance, it felt permanent. Conversations with my children became formal, short, safe. They spoke to me the way employees speak to a boss they don't trust, respectful but guarded. Alina, on the other hand, knew everything, who they liked, what scared them, what they dreamed of. I was the provider. She was the parent. The next morning, I overheard something that unsettled me deeply. I was in my study when Alina's voice floated in from the hallway. She was on the phone, speaking softly but urgently. "No, don't worry," she said. "I'll handle him. He doesn't need to know all the details." There was a pause, then she added, "They're already on our side." Our side. The words echoed in my chest. I waited until she hung up, then wheeled myself into the hallway. "Who were you talking to?" I asked casually. She smiled without hesitation. "The lawyer," she said, "about your care plan." Her eyes searched my face as if measuring how much I understood. I nodded, pretending not to feel the sting. Later that day, my eldest son came by alone. That was rare. He sat across from me, hands folded, posture stiff. "Dad," he began, "Mom says you've been stressed lately." I laughed bitterly. "Is that what she says?" He frowned. "She's just trying to help. You weren't around much when we were kids, so we trust her judgment." There it was again, the unspoken verdict. My absence had disqualified me from authority in my own family. As he spoke, I noticed something else, phrases that sounded rehearsed, words Alina often used. It was as if her voice had learned to wear my children's mouths. I asked him directly, "Do you think I don't care about you?" He hesitated too long. That pause hurt more than any answer. After he left, I sat alone, replaying every moment I had chosen work over family. I felt shame, regret, and a deep loneliness that pressed on my ribs. But beneath it all, something new began to form: suspicion. Alina wasn't just the messenger. She was the gatekeeper. She decided what reached me and what reached them. I started paying attention. I noticed missed calls that never showed up on my phone, messages summarized instead of passed along, conversations ending the moment I entered the room. I felt like a guest in my own life, watching it through frosted glass. One afternoon, I confronted Alina gently. I told her I wanted more time with the children, more direct communication. Her expression hardened for just a second before softening again. "Anthony," she said, touching my arm, "you're tired. You should rest. Let me handle things. That's what I've always done." Her tone was caring, but her words felt like a dismissal. That night, I made a decision. For the first time in decades, I stopped chasing approval. I started chasing truth. I went through old emails, financial records, legal documents. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, only that something wasn't right. And then I found it, a document I didn't remember signing, giving Alina full control over certain assets and decisions. My signature was there. The date was from a time I had been hospitalized. My hands trembled as I held the paper. Had I agreed to this, or had I trusted too blindly? As fear mixed with clarity, I realized something terrifying. My greatest mistake wasn't just neglecting my family. It was surrendering my voice to someone who may never have intended to give it back. And as I sat there, staring at that document, I knew the life I thought I understood was built on more manipulation than love, and the real betrayal might still be unfolding. If this story is already touching something deep in you, take a moment now and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd really like to know. Also, what would you have done if you were in my position? Would you confront the truth immediately or stay silent to keep the peace? Share your thoughts below. I didn't confront Alina right away. That surprised even me. The old Anthony Collins would have charged forward, demanded answers, controlled the situation. But 75 years on this earth had taught me one painful lesson. Once trust is broken, shouting rarely fixes it. So I stayed quiet. I watched. I listened. And what I discovered hurt more than I expected. I started calling my children directly, one by one, instead of going through Alina like I always had. The first few calls went to voicemail. When my youngest daughter finally answered, her voice sounded cautious, like she was speaking to a stranger. I asked if she wanted to have lunch, just the two of us. There was a pause, then she said, "Let me check with Mom and get back to you." That sentence cut deeper than any insult. A grown woman, my child, needing permission to see her own father. The next day, Alina told me my daughter was too busy. A few hours later, I accidentally overheard Alina on the phone again. "I told him she couldn't make it," she said calmly. "He doesn't need to drag her into this." I gripped the arm of my chair so tightly my knuckles turned white. She hadn't asked my daughter. She had decided for her. That was when I realized the full scope of what I had allowed. My absence hadn't just created distance, it had created dependency. Alina didn't simply fill the gap I left behind. She owned it. I began noticing how she framed me in conversations. Not cruelly, not obviously, it was subtle, almost elegant. "Your father doesn't mean it that way. He's old-fashioned. He's tired, you know how he is." Each sentence chipped away at my authority while pretending to protect me. I had been reduced to a fragile figure, someone to be managed, not respected. One evening, I asked my son directly if he thought I was losing my mind. He hesitated, then said, "Mom worries about you. She says you forget things." I laughed, a hollow sound. "Do you think that?" I asked. He looked down. That silence answered me. The betrayal wasn't loud, it was quiet, organized, patient. I hired a private attorney without telling Alina. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was sneaking around in my own marriage. The attorney reviewed the documents I found and frowned. "These were signed during a vulnerable period," he said carefully. "Legally questionable." My stomach twisted. Vulnerable. That was the word everyone used for me now. As weeks passed, my isolation deepened. Family dinners continued without me. Decisions were made without my input. Alina told people it was for my health. I watched my life being rearranged while I was still alive to see it. That kind of humiliation leaves a mark. Then came the moment that broke me. I overheard a conversation between Alina and my eldest son late one night. She didn't know I was in the hallway. "Once everything is finalized," she said, "we won't have to worry about his interference." Interference. As if my concern for my own life was an inconvenience. My son replied, "I just don't want conflict." Alina's voice softened. "I know. This is the easiest way." Easiest for whom? I rolled back into my room and closed the door quietly. I felt small, disposable. I had spent decades making sure my family would never struggle, and now they were planning a future that didn't include my voice at all. The loneliness was crushing, but beneath it something else began to rise: anger. Not the explosive kind, the focused kind. I thought about all the times I had ignored my instincts in the name of peace. All the times I had trusted without verifying. All the love I had assumed would protect me. I realized then that love without presence is fragile, and power without connection invites control. I decided I would no longer be a spectator in my own life. I began documenting everything: dates, conversations, changes. I reached out to old friends Alina had quietly pushed away over the years, men who remembered me before I became distant. They listened. They believed me. That alone felt like oxygen. One of them asked me a question that stayed with me. "Anthony, when was the last time you chose yourself?" I didn't have an answer. The truth was clear now. Alina wasn't protecting the family from me. She was protecting her control over them. And my children, shaped by years of my absence, couldn't tell the difference between care and control. As I prepared for the confrontation I knew was coming, fear mixed with resolve. I didn't know how much damage had already been done. I didn't know if my children would ever see me clearly again. But I knew this: staying silent would finish what my absence had started. And just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I received a message that made my blood run cold. A message meant for Alina, forwarded to me by mistake, revealing just how far she was willing to go to make sure I stayed powerless. Have you ever seen someone slowly manipulate a family while pretending to help? What would you have done if you discovered this kind of betrayal so late in life? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm listening. The message stared back at me from my phone like a quiet threat. It was short, written casually, almost carelessly. "Once the doctor signs off, we can move forward. He won't be in a position to argue anymore." It wasn't addressed to me. It wasn't meant for me. But there it was, proof that my fears weren't paranoia. They were plans. For a long time, I just sat there, phone resting on my lap, my chest tight. 75 years of living, of building, of sacrificing. And this was how it was meant to end. Managed out of my own life by the woman I trusted most, supported by the children I loved from a distance. I felt grief first. Deep, heavy grief. Not just for what was happening now, but for every moment I had missed. Every chance to build real intimacy instead of buying silence with money. I cried then, quietly. Not the dramatic kind of crying, but the kind that leaks out when regret finally has room to breathe. But grief didn't stay alone for long. Clarity followed. For the first time, I stopped asking, "How did this happen to me?" and started asking, "What do I do now?" I realized something important in that moment. I couldn't undo the past, but I could decide how much of the future I would surrender. The next morning, I asked Alina to sit with me, just the two of us. No children, no lawyers. She smiled politely, but I saw the tension behind her eyes. I told her I had reviewed the documents. I told her I had spoken to an attorney. For the first time in years, her calm cracked. "You're overreacting," she said quickly. "You're tired, confused." That word again, confused. I shook my head. "No," I said quietly. "I was absent, not confused, and you used that." Silence filled the room. She didn't deny it. That told me everything. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I simply told her the truth, that I would be reclaiming my medical and financial decisions, that communication with my children would go through me directly, and that I would no longer accept being treated like a liability in my own home. She called me selfish, said I was creating unnecessary conflict. But for the first time, her words didn't shrink me. The real test came when I spoke to my children. I asked them to come one evening, all of them. I told Alina I wanted to talk alone. She resisted. I insisted. That alone felt like a victory. When they arrived, the air was tense. They looked uncomfortable, guarded, used to listening, not engaging. I told them everything, not angrily, honestly. I admitted my failures, my absence, my priorities, the ways I had chosen work over presence. I told them I understood why they trusted their mother. But then I showed them the documents, the messages, the patterns. I watched their faces change slowly, disbelief giving way to confusion. My daughter cried. My son asked why I hadn't said something sooner. That question hurt, but it was fair. "Because I thought providing was enough," I said, "and because I was afraid of losing what little connection we had left." That night didn't fix everything. Healing rarely happens in a single conversation, but something shifted. For the first time in years, they looked at me not as a shadow or a problem, but as a person, flawed, yes, but present. Alina didn't speak much after that. Distance grew between us, real distance this time. And strangely, that distance brought me peace. I started therapy. I started having one-on-one conversations with my children, awkward at first, honest eventually. I learned that rebuilding trust at 75 is slow but possible. Here is the hardest truth I've learned. Money can build houses, but it cannot build bonds. Authority without presence becomes fragile. Love without time becomes invisible. I thought chasing luxury would earn me respect. Instead, it taught me what respect really costs. If you are younger and listening to my story, hear this as advice from a man who learned too late. Don't postpone presence. Don't outsource love. Don't assume tomorrow will give you time you refuse to give today. And never surrender your voice completely, no matter how much you trust someone. I am still healing. My family is still healing. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like my life belongs to me again. Not because I reclaimed control, but because I chose connection over silence. Have you ever experienced betrayal like this, quiet, slow, and wrapped in the name of care? What would you have done differently if you were in my place? Share your story and your thoughts in the comments. I'm reading them.